Hey everyone, this is Mysthea. Mysthea is a game for 2 to 4 players in which each person is going to take on the role of a hero that will recruit like soldiers and golems onto their side while they explore the land of Mystia. Now Mystia is a land that has like basically these giant floating islands that have these different terrains on them. And the players will, investigate these islands. They'll fight one another. They'll fight big giant monsters that happen to be on those islands, and they will also change the islands themselves because like these 5 islands float next to each other, but they'll actually be able to physically move the islands and change the structure of the game board. It is ostensibly a victory point game. There's lots of different ways to get victory points, but it is like an area control game. It has a lot of cards, and then the cards actually force the action, and the cards have multiple uses. Things that I really like. That's something I've always liked in games that I've played. When you have, the cards are kind of what attaches you to the game, the mechanisms, right? But the cards have several different ways that they can be used, and I've always enjoyed that. But I'll talk about that more here in just a little bit. But let's take a few moments. I'll show you how Mystia is played, and we'll come back here, and I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright, so this is Mystia. I'm going to show you how the game is played. Before I do that, I want to make sure you know that this is a prototype that I was sent. I don't have any of the cool miniatures. Well, I guess technically, yeah, I do have some of the cool miniatures, but these are just like little samples. This guy's awesome looking, though. He's so grumpy looking. But I don't have like all of the little minis that each person's going to get for their heroes and their troops and their golems and whatever when you're going to be fighting with them. So just keep that in mind as you are watching this video, that yes, I did get samples and they are super cool and they're super awesome, and the miniatures that are going to come with the game that is published are going to be super cool and super awesome, but I don't have those. Alright, so Mystia is played over 3 eras. You and the other players are going to be trying to expand and take control of these different like islands, which are these different regions. They're kind of like, just think of them as like different realms that are kind of floating around this kind of central area here. As the game is played, you are going to be able to move these islands and get them close. Like certain islands, like right now, like these are connected, like you can see those lines. Later on, you'll be able to move them around, and different islands or regions or what have you will be attached later on in the game. It's something it's an action you take that's called attunement, but I'll explain that here in just a little bit. Each player will get a player board that you see here. Your player board will be used to track your experience points, which are there. Experience points are used for your champions, which are these little pawns here. Your champions will be trying to go to the locations that have your encounter discs, which is that thing right there. And when they're on there, they can spend experience points to go on adventure kind of thing. And I'll explain that as well here in just a little bit. These are all different actions that you'll be taking on your different turns. And one of the things that's really cool about this game is like all the different actions you can do. It's kind of a it's a weird like exploration game, and I'll talk a lot about that probably in my final thoughts. But regardless, you have these troops, as I said. You have these squares that represent your golems. Once again, these will be miniatures in the final game. You also have a square that represents the energy that you have. Energy is just a resource that you'll use every turn that will allow you to do different actions, and energy will fluctuate up and down. It's not like a static, like a hardcore, like permanent resource. It will always be changing. Each player will get a champion card, and then they'll have explains like what their special power is something that breaks the rules. This game has a lot of iconography. However, once you've played the game, you will definitely catch on as far as what the different iconography means. They have an excellent explanation of each and every card in the game and explaining the iconography. And also, there's an app that I believe is going to come out. I got beta access to it on your phone that allows you to look up each card as well. So That was pretty cool. But like I said, any game with iconography, after you've played it once or twice, you kind of start to grok all of the different icons, whatever. Like this one is, if this champion is involved in a battle against a monster, that's what it means, and it wins, the glory points it gets for defeating that monster will be worth double. She'll get double the glory points, and so each player, will get a champion like this guy, gets a bonus of 3 power and combats, things like that. So each person will get a champion, and that'll be their champion. Champions can't die; they can get wounded, and they can have lesser effects. If your champion gets wounded, you end up turning it on its side like this, and then they're only worth one point in combat instead. And they also they can't use their special ability either. So that's how that happens. But they do get healed, so after you go through an era, so they aren't permanently wounded forever or whatever. So your board will keep track of those, your energy and your experience. You keep track of your troops and your golems and your fortifications. You have a bunch of, you see your troops and your golems off the board this time. As the game is played, you'll basically recruit them, place them on your board, and then be able to deploy them out onto the different regions. Each player will start with 4 of these action cards. You might have noticed that there's more of them way up there, and you see 2 decks of these. Those are the Era 1 action cards, and you can see there's 3 available there. And then there's Era 2 and Era 3. After those eras are done, obviously you replace the different cards. There's really no hand limit in the game as far as the cards that you have, but obviously you'll be placing cards as you move on. Cards will become more powerful, so certain cards will kind of be phased out. Also, on your board here, you can see that these spots here are the same size as different as these cards, and so some cards like this blue card here, all these blue cards upgrade a certain ability. Like this upgrades your fortification spot, and so if you get that, you just place it on that location to upgrade it. Now later on, if you get another one that you like better, you can place that on there and then discard that one. So this ability allows you to place a fortification anywhere. Normally you can't. You can only place it in the same spot as where your champion is. But if you have this, whenever you build a fortification, you can put it anywhere. So that's a pretty good power, right? And then it just goes on there, and it's your ability. Some of the green cards have this little gear there, and these 3 spots you might notice also have gears on them. So you have spot for 3 of these cards to be placed on there that then you can use. And if you ever decide there's one that you like better, you can discard one and then replace it with one of the other cards that you get later on in the game. So it's just stuff like that. I do like that. I do like the whole you get to build up your internal mechanisms, if you will, your infrastructure, if that's such a thing. So it's one of those things that I enjoy a great deal about this game. All right, so this is the events board. There is a deck of cards here that has different events on it, and the cool thing about the events are that you don't resolve them until the end of the era. And so all of these cards, and you might have noticed also, these are monster cards, and there's a missing monster card right there. The monster cards, the missing monster card is right there. And I'll talk about monsters in a little bit. But so what happens is, as the game progresses, you will start placing these out like so, and you will act it as they come forth. What this is going to tell you is that at the end of an era, so when you let me just show you how this works. So you'll have this one there, and so at the end of an era, what will happen is you will activate certain things this will cause the monsters to move clockwise along the regions. This causes the monster to attack the region they're in. However, these that represent these different areas, this is rivers. So you will actually look and on the board for the spots that have rivers, and the spots that have rivers, you will will see who has the most power, like basically area control for those locations, and then they will be worth a certain number of points. So in this case, it's 5, and this is worth 6, and so on down the path. So it's one of those things where it's kind of neat, where you can actually see that, like in this particular era, like the forests are going to be worth 6. So you're going to really want to have, you know, the forests being like, you know, where you want the most of your people. And so like you could have forests here, forest there, and forest there. And the more people you have in those spots, the more power you'll have in there, and then you can score more points. And I kind of like how it's open knowledge, right? So like as the game progresses, you can go for those locations, or, you know, maybe you will go for like a lesser location, and let the other players, you know, squabble over the forest, and you can sneak in and go for a different type of terrain. So it's just kind of a neat little thing there. Oh, and I was going to mention that, I apologize. All of these have this little X on them, meaning they're starting cards. You'll get one of each color. And so that's sort of, and I should have actually mentioned. So these cards here are more of like an attack card, and these are more of like a glory point card. And so when you use those, you know, these are kind of permanent effects that you can place onto your board here, whereas these have kind of like an immediate effect when you use them. So all right, cool. I should also mention, and you'll notice this here in just a little bit, is that the cards have multiple uses, which is something I've always liked in games. So like when you're trying to decide if a card is something you want to save for, what use you're going to save it for. All right, so after you set up everything, each person will get this little card here. This card, it starts randomly at the very first time, and it tells you which turn you're going to go. So in this case, we're going to go third, and we get 5 energy. You know, and so that's why our cube here is on 5 energy. And when we use this, you'll either use it to make an attack or to go through an attunement. Again, I'll explain those actions here in just a little bit. But when you use it, you'll flip it over to this side where it is no longer functional. Like you won't be able to use it to attack or use it to attune. Now there are ways, different cards and different actions that you can do that will allow you to flip it over to this activation spot. But normally, if it's still like this, you know, at the end of an era, you will get to flip it back over to the active location. So don't worry if you know, you end an era and it's on this slide. You do get to flip it over. And then after that first era, when you have when it isn't always going to be the first doled out randomly as far as who is first, second, or third player. When you start up the next era, you will actually, the person who is in first place as far as points will get number 1, second place number 2, third place number 3, and so on and so forth down the line. All right, so now, after all that, what exactly do you do on your turn? Well, I'm glad you kind of sort of asked me. So I did, they do have these. Can you read all that? Yeah, I do like getting player aids because they do dumb things down a little bit and give you the good overview. But on your turn, what you'll do is the first thing that happens is the first player will take this and they'll move it off to the side like that. So you know that's kind of like the counter for the era, right? So then on your turn, you can take one of 3 actions, which is acting, meditating, or developing. And then there's all these other secondary actions you can take as well. And the secondary actions are free. You can do whatever you want. But you have to take either an act, a meditate, or a develop action. So acting is you just take a card and then you play a card. So one of your 4 cards, you will use that card, and then you will use it to for its action that the card actually represents. So I already kind of touched on this. So let me. So when you act with either of these types of cards, the blue or the green, you'll notice that it has that 2 up there. That's the command points of the card. If you spend the exact amount of energy as that's how you get to place this on your board. You know, you spend the energy, you place it on your board, and now you have that special ability. And until you get rid of that card, until you replace it with another one, the same thing goes with acting and using this card. You would just place it on the spot and spend the energy involved with that action, and just be able to place that card down on the player board. Those are pretty simple, and these are like the extra actions that like you can get extra actions like, or accessory actions, because these are considered accessories here. Accessory actions are those free actions, or some of those free actions that you can do, and they're represented by placing these green cards into one of those 3 slots. The command points on here differently. You can spend command points in a lot of different ways. You can spend 1 command point to get an energy. So you could, like, you know, spend, if you got these 2 command points, you could spend 1 and I'm going to gain an energy back. You know, that's a complete and total fair action. You can, when you spend those 2, you could use it to spend a command point to deploy 1 troop in the troop space on your player board. So you can spend a command point to take one of your troops and put it out there. You can spend 2 command points to place one of your golems onto your player board. Now these cost the exact same amount to place onto the board where your champion is. So, and sometimes like there'll be like remember how I have that special ability now technically to be able to put a fortress wherever I want? Same kind of deal where like you could get things where you'd be able to place them otherwise. But you could spend 1 point to place a troop in that, or you could spend 2 points to place a golem where your champion is. And as you probably guess, golems are more powerful than troops in battle. You know, they add more strength to your combat. So recruiting and deploying are another way you can spend command points. You can also spend command points to move. You can spend 1 command point to move 1 unit from 1 region to another on the same island, or to another region of the same type that you started on, like next island. So you could spend a point to move a golem, or to that other forest, or what have you. Now troops and golems can move once, but you can move a champion twice. So you could move a champion, like if you wanted to get him into another fog spot, you could move him to that spot and then to that spot over there. You know, that's an option. Or you can move them over here because you want to beat up on that red guy right there. So champions can move any number of times. The golems and troops can only move once. So you can do the same kind of moves, but and you can do them in any order. But you don't have to spend all the command points either. That's totally up to you. Now, alternatively, you can spend energy to do the actual action on the card. So you can see here, like this particular card, that little symbol there, spend 2 energy, and you can basically teleport your champion. That's like kind of like a little warp gate, and that's what the image is. So you can do that. And with these yellow cards, they're mostly, you can see the symbol, like right there, where you can see that that's like the glory points. Yellow cards, that's mostly what they're used for. Their special abilities are. Like you can spend 2 energy points, and then you're allowed to then get 3 glory points for each forest that you control. And so in this situation, like if we did that like there, we would have probably control over this forest, control over that forest, and so we would be able to cash that in for points. So you can see there how the difference between the 2 different types of cards. All right, so that is acting. Acting basically allows you to play a card. Keep that in mind. All right, so now develop. So when you develop, you have to have at least 1 energy point. So let's, if you have 1 energy point, cost 1 to do it. When you develop, you observe. Like this is the development track up there with those extra 3 cards. So when you develop, what you're going to do is either you're going to take the 3 cards that are on that development track. You don't like any of them. You'll scoop them up and you'll put them underneath the deck, and you'll draw 3 brand new cards. Or you can spend. You can just take the top card and place it in that location there. And then you'll spend either 1, 3, or 5 energy points to get 1, 2, or 3 of those cards and add them to your hand. So like in this situation, let's say I wanted this one because it's like a better, like it allows you to recruit golems and troops for energy. and this one is like a cost no energy. You can use it to just gain an energy. Both 2 cards. So I'd have to spend 3 energy to be able to get those 2. And then I would place another card out there. So I would, you know, just like in most games, like when you have a tableau of cards, if you do that, then you have to make sure that it's full for the next person to take their actions. Now these cards go immediately into my hand for me to be able to use them. Now the last action that you can take is meditating. So when you meditate, you automatically, as an action, you just automatically get 3 you get 3 energy just for meditating. You're like secluding yourself in your monastery or what have you, and you're gaining energy through meditating. But then you check all the units, all your units deployed on all the islands. And for each region that has at least one of your unit, you'll get a bonus for each one. So if you have somebody in a forest, you'll get an energy. If you have somebody in a river, you'll get a glory point. If you have it in the fog, you will get an experience point. And if you have one in a crystal, you will get a command point that you immediately can spend for recruiting and deploying units. So after you meditate, you have to use it up. If you don't spend those command points, you don't get to save them. They'll go away. So use them if you can. Now, those are the 3 different actions. Pretty simple, right? Now, the accessories actions or the other actions you can do. When you do those, you can activate an accessory, which is just one of these accessory cards that you have here. You can start a battle, and I'll talk about battles here in just a moment. And you can your charge to move an island and do an attunement. I'll talk about that in just a second. Or finally, if your hero or your champion is in the same spot as their encounter spot, then you can choose to do your encounter. Now, you have to spend experience points to face an encounter, and they cost, and you can do up to 6 of them, and they cost 1 experience, then 2 experience, then 3 experience, then 4 experience, and so on and so forth, until you get to the 6th one. So what happens is this is the encounter deck, and so when you draw, you look at the top card. You're not allowed to look at the back. Now, you can agree to play that you can look at the back before you decide, but this is kind of, so the first thing you do is you'll notice that like you'll get 7 glory points for doing this, right? And then you have to decide, there's like a treasure and a boot. So the boot is kind of like moving around exploring. Treasure is like collecting and keeping. And you have to decide which of these 2 like encounters you want to do. So after you choose, so let's say I want to do treasure, you flip it over, and you look, and so like the treasure one, you look and see, you know, what the action is for doing the treasure. So in this case, we're going to get a bonus of 3 energy, and then we're going to move our encounter spot 2 spaces clockwise. So we go ahead. So we got 7 glory points, and we got like 3 energy. So, you know, we actually turned out pretty good on that because of the points, and we've just kind of replenished the energy for doing so. So, and then you keep these underneath your hero, your champion here, because you want to make sure that you keep track of how many of those that you've completed. All right, so I was going to talk about combat and attunement. All right, so combat's pretty simple, and I'm going to kind of set something up really easily here. So combat can occur between like multiple people. And so what happens with combat is that you will, once again, you'll have to flip this over if you want to start the combat. So if I'm yellow and I start the combat here, I'm here, let me move my champion back here because I want to start it like knowing that I'm going to win. So in that spot, what's going to happen is the black player, the red player, and the yellow player are all going to be in combat. And each person then is going to have to decide how they're going to react to that combat. And they're going to look at their hand of cards, and they're going to decide on a card they're going to play or have no card. They put their hands, underneath the table. They put a card in their hand, or don't, and they turn it over here, and everybody reveals their card or nothing in their hand all at once. Now, depending upon the color of card that you reveal, you're going to react in different ways. If you reveal a yellow card, this signifies that you're going to retreat. You're going to receive as many moves as the command points that you have on there, and you can move that many units out of the region where the battle is taking place. Now, you might do this just because you can't win, and you don't want to have your units be destroyed in the combat. So you'll do that to remove them. If you play, I don't have a blue card here in my hand. Let me grab one here. If you play a blue card, you'll get, this is defending. You receive as many glory points as the card that you play, and then your people will stay there. And you'll also get a bonus. Like you'll get 2 glory points for this, or depending upon the command points on the card, plus a glory point for every unit that you have in that location. It's kind of like one of the, basically they're standing their ground, so you get glory for doing that. If you play a green, you will receive as many energy points. This is called sacrifice. Basically, you're giving up on your people is the idea. You're sacrificing them. You gain 1 energy for every command point that's on the card, plus the number of units in that region. So you'll get a bonus energy. And finally, if you play a red card, it is the attack card. And if you play a red one, you receive as many strength points as the command points on the card, and then you add that strength to your total strength to that region. Now, after everybody determines how many strength points they have, you'll get 1 for every troop, you'll get 2 for every golem, 2 for every fortification that you have built in that area. So if like yellow had fortification in there, that'd be another 2. And then if your champion's worth 3, or if they're wounded, they're worth 1. Then you just compare the total strength in comparison to the other player's total strength. And then whoever, like, so in this case, yellow would be, let me take that fortification away so it isn't so lopsided, but so it'd be 2, 3, and then 6, right? And depending on, maybe we played like a defense card, so we got a bunch of glory points for this. And then so red, had 3, and maybe they played a red 3 card. Maybe red did that, so they have 6 as well, right? And so then black just, maybe they did a sacrifice. They said, you know what, I'm just giving up on my troop. I don't care. I want to get some energy. And so you compare 6 to the 1, and then you would normally lose up to 5, you -1. And remember, these two tied. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry, they didn't tie. So, like, let's see, 3 is 6, and so this, well, yeah, actually, they did tie. Now I'm thinking, look, it's 3, and then these are 3. So, yes, so they tied. So both of them have a total of 6. And then the 1. So he's going to be destroyed. He's just going to go back to, if I had the black player board out here, they just go back onto the board like this. They can be deployed later. But both red and yellow would get glory for winning the battle, because neither of them technically lost. They tied each other, and they're going to get a glory point, or 2 glory points for every unit that was removed. So, if, let's just say he had 2 on there. So both of those are gone. And then both yellow and red would get 4 glory points for destroying them. So you might see why then you'd retreat, because, you'd give up on the spot, but you'd also be able to, save your units and keep them in there. But also, you would keep the other players from getting glory points for doing it. Now, the final thing you can do is moving an island or end the attunement. So it's technically 2 different things, but they are combined. So in order to move an island, you have to have this tile on the energy side, not this side. And so when you choose that, whatever island your champion is on is the island you're going to move. And so what's going to happen is it's going to be moved into the middle like this. Now, it's possible that you'll be able to attune the island as well, as long as the attunement card, which are these cards over here, are still available. So you look and see if that card is available. Obviously it is. This is it's the volcano. So we have the volcano. And then there is a bonus. In this case, you're going to get 2 victory points for each card that's in your pile, basically cards you've played. So you do that attunement, and so then you keep that. You can get multiples of these cards. Like you can get these more of these cards, but you can only do 1 attunement per era. So just keep that in mind. All right. So once you move that into the middle, and you move the island, now you're going to pick a spot for it. Now, when I pick which spot that I want to move the island to, I have to, like, maybe there's a rhyme to my reason, right? Maybe I want to make sure that, like, this island's forest region is close to that forest's region. Or maybe, it's like one of those things where I want to be next to where my encounter disk is, so it'll be easier to get to. There's all kinds of different things. But let's say I want to move it to this spot. So what happens is that we move these two clockwise, like so, and then we slide it in there. So now we've changed the structure of the board, and I've placed these different islands in different spots that now, as far as the travel between those locations, is going to be different, and dynamic for everybody else that's playing. And it might help other people, it might hurt other people. There's a lot of stuff that can happen with those decisions. So it's kind of a cool thing. Now I should mention, you can always move the islands as an action, right? And this is not one of the main 3 actions. This is like an added action. You can always do this. You just have to have your token on this side, not that side, and you might not be able to get the attunement for it, but you can always move it where your champion is. So keep that in mind. All right, the only other thing I really want to talk about is just the monster. When you resolve, remember, like here, if we start resolving these different events. Like when you have the monster show up, and notice how the monster is purple, and so the purple's there. Normally this is going to be a miniature when the game is published, and later on, like, this monster will come out during the 2nd era, and this monster will come out in the 3rd era, so the monsters will activate. So when the monsters happen, what happens is that the monster will attack everything that happens to be in that location. And the bottom line is that you're either going to defeat the monster or not. You can't kill the monster, but you can get bonus points for defeating it. So the monster has a strength of 15. This one has strength of 15. And you'll notice that it's worth 5, 4, and 3 for the people that defeat it. So combat is, you just check the total strength for the different people that are involved in that combat. And let me just, make it easy. So let's give red that, and let's give blue a golem. So we total up the total points. Yellow is going to have more strength than blue. Blue is going to have more strength than red, and red's going to have more strength than black. But everybody combined in that combat is going to be enough to defeat the 15 strength of that monster. And so yellow, in that case, would get 5 points, and then 4 points, and then 3. And those would be divvied out. And then, once the monster is defeated, it will move clockwise around the board. Now, I should mention, as I already said, that the storm action event will cause the monsters also to move clockwise around the board. And so, depending upon, like if this was here, and then there, like so, like, the monster might move away from the spot that it's at, that your particular heroes were at. So, and just basically, if the monster doesn't get defeated, nobody gets any points for it. But you have to keep a mind out as far as, like, where it's going to be, because it is a good way to get some extra glory points if you can manage to pull it off. Of course, it should be mentioned that if you don't defeat the monster, so let's say the monster is there, and let's say I had those guys in there, and that's all that was protecting that particular spot. If I don't defeat the monsters, and all the players will choose a region of the attacked island where their units are, and remove them as if they had been beaten in battle. So, and nobody gets any glory points for that as well. So, like, here. And the interesting thing there is you only pick one region. So if they were kind of spaced out like that, and the monster attacked, I could choose to lose this guy, but blue would be forced to lose their golem. And so the monster can destroy the things that are in those spots. So you resolve, at the end of era, you resolve everything. You earn the bonus points, as I said before, for, whoever's got the most power in each river gets, and so on and so forth. You get those bonus glory points. Then whatever cards you haven't used up, from that development deck, you get rid of. You're going to take the 2nd era cards, and you're going to place them up into that spot. Everybody's going to basically remove everything from the board. So you can't just have your fortifications there. Everybody starts fresh, and you will go at it again. You'll do the exact same thing again. You do that, go through the events, and then you will, and once Act 2, your Era 2 is done, then you'll go to Era 3. At the end of Era 3, you'll total up whoever has the most glory points, and they will win the game. Mystia it's one of those games that blew my mind as I played it. Mostly because it was one of those things where the interconnectivity of everything that was going on, the conflict between the players, the multiple use cards, it hit on all of the things that I really, really enjoy in a very tactical, very strategic game. And I really like area control. I like fantasy themed stuff, and I really, really enjoyed this. But let me talk more about that in my final thoughts. Alright, as I said, I really, really liked Mysthea. I enjoyed it so much. This is one of those games where the actual, it's a victory point or glory point game. Whoever ends up with the most points ends up being the winner. But as I said before, and I've said a few times now, there's so many different ways to get those points, right? I mean, you can go on adventures with your character. You can be a warlike tribe and just attack other people. You can plan ahead and make sure you control as much ground as you possibly can. And I think the game does lend itself obviously towards a more of a conflict driven game. I mean, it is an area control game, and at the end of eras, getting those bonus points, by having your troops out there and warring with you and knocking other people down, so you can get the most points. It is a conflict game. Now, I don't think that's the only way you can play, but it definitely does clue into the way my group and the way I like to play games, and I really do like area control games. I guess technically, lots of aggression-oriented games lend themselves to be area control type of situations. But I've had players play the game, and they've gone different routes. Like they've completed all 6 of the quests. Whereas I tend to not do that. I maybe get 1 or 2 if it happens to be close by and it's an action that I can take. But I was always more about gaining all the ground, getting more and more troops out. But instead, other players went that route, and I've had them win the game doing that. So I do think that depending upon the play style of the group or the play style of the individual player, you definitely can go and have different paths to that victory, if you will. So something to think about as far as the game is concerned. Now, I've already said kind of what I really liked about it. I really like the theme. I like the fantastic theme. I adore the art. I mean, the art is just beautiful. And this is definitely one of those eye-catching games. I'm really looking forward to the way the game is going to look with all the different miniatures, and when they're on the board, because I think that's really going to be eye-grabbing, and it's going to have a great table presence. Now, it doesn't have to have a great table presence to be a great game, but it does accentuate an already really, really good game. I think, like I said, it's an exploration game, and I've kind of talked a lot about how I've become an exploratory gamer later on. At the very beginning, there was those 3 or 4 or 5 board games. This is 10 years ago that I played over and over and over and over again just because I really, really liked them. But then as I started playing more and more games, I got to a point where I was only playing games 2 or 3 times because I would kind of explore them. I'd figure out what made them tick, if you will. And then the game had kind of given me what I wanted. I explored it, I figured it out, and now let's move on to something else. And that's, and for people to play games over and over and over again, still, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that's not the type of gamer I think I've evolved into, if you will. So, this is a game, however, the exploration has continued to give back to me each and every time that I've played. I find the usage of the cards to be superlative. It's having cards being more than one resource is something that I really, really like. And I was worried when I first played the game. It's there's only 3 spots for these green cards. There's only one of each of these spots for the blue cards. Once they're out there, what do? You upgrade. What do you do with those backup cards? Well, obviously, for combats and being able to use the cards for different purposes, like using blue cards for defense and getting a bunch of glory points for things like that. I mean, you can go into combats and hopefully people attacking you and you attacking other people for the express purpose of win or lose. You just want the points, right? You can turn that blue card into an 8, 9, or 10 point thing depending upon the units you have on the board and the card that you have in your hand. And that is you might lose the combat, but you are cashing in, and that's something to be like. That's another one of those paths to victory that I was talking about. And so I'm about 6 or 7 plays into this game, and I don't see myself getting bored of it anytime soon. It's just, it has enough conflict and enough interaction between the other players that's something that I need for the game to kind of keep giving back to me. And just the mechanisms themselves just really, really shine as far as the dynamic board and the different options that you have, and just the feel of the game, the tension of the game. Because it is not a really, really long game. I mean, you only have those 3 eras, and you kind of get through those fairly quickly. So it definitely leaves me wanting more when I get done, and that's a good feeling. It isn't like a feeling of like, oh, I didn't get to do enough. It was like, oh man, that was really good. Let's try this again so I can try something different. And then when I feel like that after a game, I know I have a winner in my hands. So there you go. That is Mysthea. If you have any questions about the game, please ask away. I'd be happy to answer those as best as I can. As always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. And until next time, I am the Undead Viking, and I'm going to be telling you to have yourself one heck of an awesome day. All right, bye-bye.